I guess we can get started. Good evening, brethren. How are you all tonight?
Just fine. Thank you.
Very good. Very good.
Awesome. Well, welcome to District 13. Our deputy's not here tonight, so I guess I'll step in and be the host with the most. Tonight we're joined by our Right Worshipful Senior Grand Warden, Cameron Bailey, and he's going to talk with us tonight about Masonic Brotherhood, I think is kind of the generic topic, if I remember correctly. I may be messing that up completely. I don't know. But he's going to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, to be honest with you. And with our deputy not here tonight, are there any particular announcements or anything before we get started? And we'll have Right Worshipful talk for a little bit, and then we can have some discussion about that, and then just an open chit-chat if you want to. How's your Monday morning donuts and coffee going, Wayne or Bill or whoever wants to talk?
We've had 6 people both weeks. It's actually been really nice. Dan Langworthy, who was an old senior warden, has come on video twice, and it's been enjoying talking to him. And yeah, it's been really good. It's been really good. Don has come. Most Worshipful Bill was come, and it was a lot of fun. We ended up being in like an hour and a half each time. I figured we wouldn't even make a half hour, but yeah, they turned out really well, and I'm going to keep doing them until we can see each other's faces again. So.
What time is that again, Wayne? What time?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Okay.
Mondays at 9.
And Mondays at 9. It's going to be the same sign in and password, and Don has that. And if you don't have it, I can give it to you too.
So Verity has a weekly meeting, a Zoom meeting every week where we just get together and talk about how everybody's doing and review the people that we've contacted. You know, the Masonic outreach thing. We review the people we've contacted and things like that. And last time we had a thing where I took photographs of a bunch of different lodges and seen how many people actually knew what the lodge was based on the photograph, and gave a $10 Starbucks card away to the guy that knew the most of them. So, but anyway, that's Wednesday at 7:30, I believe. If you're interested in attending it, let me know. I'll get you the Zoom link and stuff like that.
One other side note, David, Todd Johnstone and I were talking, and he sent me our most recent phone list. So I spent all of the morning and a little bit of the afternoon calling brothers today, just checking in and making sure everybody was surviving. I got one divorce story, and everybody else was doing pretty good. I was actually talking to Todd when Bill showed up at his front door. So, but that went really good too. It actually kind of inspired me a little bit and made me feel pretty proud of being the senior warden, and I took that upon myself. So,
excellent. Well, I know that talking about Washington Masonic Charities and the Outreach Services Program, the Masons Care deal they have, of course, they love to do it in person if possible, but they will perform virtual training if you can, if you like that. It's a neat program on contacting all of our members, and especially those that are not in touch with lodge or haven't been attending lodge. So it's a neat program, and also to get in touch with the widows.
And I got probably half of the calls, well, more than half the calls I got were, "Thank you so much for thinking of me and calling." That was the best part. I really was. It's not my thing calling and talking to people on the phone, but it was really good because I connected with some people I hadn't in a long time, and good stuff.
Well, here's a little stab. That's absolutely great. And to pull on the heartstrings a little bit, Byron was talking to us about a message he received from a widow, and this will hopefully motivate us all to do more and to contact our brother. And she said, "You know what? I'm really, in the most friendly manner." She said, "I'm really upset." She said, "You know that the lodge." And my husband gave years and years and years of his life to his lodge. And when his dementia set in and he stopped attending lodge, nobody called. And then we went in the hospital, nobody called. And when he passed, nobody called. He said, I can't believe it. She said, I'm so upset with the Masons and with his lodge because they didn't communicate with him just because he wasn't attending. So That's great, Wayne, to hear that you're doing that. And I know a lot of other lodges are doing that. Sounds like Verity's doing that as well. A lot of other lodges are doing that. So keep up the great work, and they do appreciate that. Even just the little phone calls and the little messages. All right. Any other comments or questions or statements or whatever? We'll let our Senior Grand Warden take it away.
Thank you, Right Worshipful Brothers. I'd like to talk to you tonight a little bit about mentorship and how that can lead to brotherhood if we do it correctly. I think it's fairly clear that the young men who join our fraternity today are doing so looking for a couple of different things. I think first of all, they're looking for fellowship with men whom they can admire. And I think, frankly, they're looking for esoteric Masonic knowledge. I think that's always been a large draw to our fraternity, even if we don't admit it. But unfortunately, I think in the vast majority of cases, in the vast majority of lodges, we're not really providing either of those things. And I ask myself why that is. And I think it's because bad traditions and bad habits built up over the course of time. You know, from the 1920s to the 1960s, men were joining Freemasonry as they had never done before and have never done since. Lodges of over 1,000 men were not uncommon, nor were lodges that did degree work a heck of a lot of nights a month. And there were so many men joining in this time that I think it was very likely impossible for the lodges to properly mentor them. So early during this growth period, mentors were bringing in so many people, they were responsible for so many people, that they were simply too busy to teach well. And then later during this period, those who later became mentors hadn't been properly mentored themselves. So they had little of value that they could teach in turn or experience that they could draw from. I think that's how it was historically. But we aren't facing those membership tidal waves now, and we haven't for decades. Nevertheless, instead of going back to our roots and doing it right, I fear that in a lot of ways we're actually doing it even worse today. Masonic proficiency, properly and historically done, is the memorization of the posting lectures. And historically, universally, this was required for advancement. In the old days of our fraternity, indeed for our first hundreds of years, we used to do all of that memorization mouth to ear. One experienced Mason spent hours on hours teaching it to one new Mason. And it took a lot of time, and it was a lot of work. But it built a bond of fellowship, a friendship that had lasted forever. Because through this quest to learning, all that time spent together, those two men became joined. Unfortunately, as time went on, we got a little bit lazy as a fraternity. We decided to make a cipher available. And with the cipher, all the mentor really had to do was teach the new guy how to read it. And then he could go off on his own. It was easier, it was faster. It still took some time. So it still started to build that bond of fellowship. But that friendship, I think, in a lot of cases, wasn't as strong as it could be. Then, more recently, I think, as a fraternity, we got really lazy. And some of us, I think, shamefully lazy. We gave up hundreds of years of tradition, and we created an alternate proficiency. We shined it up. We gave it the fancy name, candidate education program, and we put it in our code. Now all the mentor had to do was throw this new book at that new Mason. And for a lot of people, they thought, hey, the task of mentoring is done. There was no fellowship required, no time spent together required, and no friendship required. And I know that wasn't the intention when that proficiency was created. But in far too many cases, that has been the practice in our lodges. We just give the guy the book, we tell him to read it, and we ask him to bring back some answers to some questions at some future point. We're misusing it. And when we misuse it like that, is it any wonder that we can't hold 90% of our new initiates? And I firmly believe that other than the Morgan affair, nothing Freemasonry has ever done has resulted in sorry, getting some feedback, in more harm to the fraternity than the development and use or misuse of that education program. A smart lodge, a good mentor, to comply with the code, will give a copy to the new guy. But tell him to put it on a shelf and then actually mentor him, as we're supposed to do, as we did for hundreds of years. There's good information within that program. I don't deny that. So we need to get that information out of it and actually teach it to this brand new Mason. We can't rely on the book to teach him because he can't find fellowship with a book. We need to teach him ourselves one-on-one, walk him through everything step by step. And that, if we do that, if we truly mentor him and truly teach him, we're going to create a man who's a Mason for life, not a Mason who's going to go NPD at his very first opportunity because he never built a friendship with any of the men in that lodge. And if we can get that first relationship good and solid, in time, it's going to expand to include others within the lodge. And together, that small group of men, that subset of that lodge, will become friends, indeed brothers for life. The second thing the new men are seeking, knowledge, is directly related to the first. And it's funny to me that in many cases we deny that Freemasonry even has any knowledge or secrets. Too often we claim that there aren't any secrets or that our secrets are limited to the modes of recognition or obligations. Frankly, I think that's nonsense. And I think the reason people sometimes think that is because Freemasonry has never given its knowledge freely. It's never just written it out. Rather, the craft hides that knowledge, those secrets, if you will, behind veils. Think about the very definition of Freemasonry. A peculiar system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. Veiled in allegory, illustrated by symbols. Obviously, this makes it clear that there is esoteric knowledge, secrets, if you will, contained within Masonry. I'll give an example from the first degree. Quoting, "My brother, you are hereafter to make yourself known among Masons by certain signs, a token, a word, and the perfect points of your entrance. The signs, token, and word have already been explained to you. I will now explain the perfect points of your entrance. Every Mason has 4, which are the guttural, the pectoral, the manual, and the pedal." You know, guttural, pectoral, manual, and pedal, these could be meaningless words just strung together, gibberish if understood literally. But they're not meaningless if we remember that everything in Masonry, everything in our degrees is symbolic. To me, this says that you'll be known to be a Mason by what you say, the guttural, by what you believe, the pectoral, by what you do, the manual, and by where you go, the pedal. That's a truth for me, but it was rightly veiled within our ritual. And it's a truth for me, but maybe not for you. Maybe upon your own reflection and research, you come up with a different interpretation of that teaching. And that's perfectly okay. Indeed, that personal journey towards personal truth is the very essence of Freemasonry. The early fathers of our rituals veiled this knowledge because it's a truism that a man won't value anything that he doesn't in some way have to work for. So Masonry veils its secrets so that once a man discovers them for himself, he'll value what he's learned. He'll remember them. And so as mentors, since what we take from the ritual or from our symbolism can vary and should vary from person to person, it's not our place to tell the people we mentor what these truths are, because that's for us. So we don't tell him what our version of those things are. Rather, it's our job to show him how he can find the knowledge for himself. And that's one of the reasons we need to teach him the ritual, because he can't reflect on the ritual if he doesn't even know what the ritual is. So always our focus, as we go about mentoring this new man, bringing him into our lodge, welcoming him into our wider brotherhood, has to be how we can teach him to find his own truths within our ritual, our allegory, and our symbolism. You know, I read once that more books have been written about Freemasonry than any subject but religion. I don't know if that's true or not, but even the quickest glance at our Grand Lodge library will show that we hold more books than any man could read in a lifetime. And in the scheme of things, our library is a very small one when compared to some other Grand Lodges and certainly to our Scottish Rite. But within these books are where the Mason we're mentoring can search to find his own truth. And it's our job, and I know Very Worshipful David has been working on a program to do just this. It's our job to point him towards the best of those. And importantly, as we get to know him, to be able to figure out what books might speak to him as an individual and make sure to point him towards those. So as mentors, we point out the path to knowledge. And if we do that, and if we create that strong bond of fellowship and friendship and brotherhood, if we spend time with this young man, instead of just handing him a book and sending him on his way, if we do that and we do it right, we're creating a Mason for life. And that's the most important thing we can do. And if we do it, Masonry will thrive. It'll grow again. If we don't, if we continue to demand little to nothing from initiates, if we just continue to hand him a book and send him on his way and say that our job trying to bring him into our fraternity is done, well, then the slow collapse that we've been seeing will assuredly continue. So I certainly hope that we can do the former. And I know that it's something that a lot of people throughout this jurisdiction, a lot of lodges are working on seriously. But I think so often when we do a degree, I see a worshipful master, he's standing in the east, the degree's done, the lecture's done, he's just invited or welcomed this new man into the fraternity. Then he lifts his head and he looks around and he asks who wants to volunteer to be the man's mentor. And that's all the thought that too many lodges actually put into this most vital part of our fraternity, And we need to stop that. We need to have our guys know how to mentor. We have to have our mentors lined out well ahead of giving the poor guy his degree, so that he truly can get a proper welcome to our fraternity, so that he truly can feel that brotherhood that I know all of us feel within our lodges. And with that, brothers, I thank you very much for your time this evening.
Excellent. Excellent. Brethren, if you want to react, you can click on the reactions button. There's a thumb or a clap, or you can do the physical. John, that was great too. Our worshipful, thank you for those words. That was timely and important.
Thank you, sir.
If you want to make any comments, brethren, you can unmute yourselves. If you're on a phone, you just tap the screen and you poke the microphone. That red slash will go away, and your microphone will be turned back on again. If
Can you hear me, David?
I'd like to make a comment. When
one at a time. Go ahead, Bill.
The
Yep.
proficiency came out. I was a big supporter of that. Because it is such a good learning tool. Good, better than just simply memorizing the work. And so I was a big supporter of it. But I listened to Clint talk about, or Cameron here talk about where that's taken us. And, I absolutely agree with that. While that's a great tool, we've misused it. And we need to keep it around. We need to use it. It needs to be a part of the mentoring process. But for heaven's sakes, let's get back to developing this relationship with our candidates. They absolutely need to do that.
I agree with you very much in that you can't just hand them the book. You got to work the posting lecture in with the book, and don't say, okay, you answered that correctly. Ask him where he got the answer. So he had to do some lookup. He had to do some learning. I think, like Bill has said, we've misused it grossly.
Yeah, I was reminded of when I was made a Master Mason in Yakima. My coach, who took me through all 3 degrees, taught me strictly mouth to ear. And that's how I learned the ritual. At that time, I was pretty good at it. Of course, I've gone to the wayside lately, it seems like. But yeah, and to this day, I remember that gentleman's name, Worshipful Master. He was a worshipful brother, Tony D. Tomaso. And I'll never forget him. He was a mentor.
I think beyond the catechism and beyond the alternate proficiency, I think we also have to say, okay, you've had your degree. You're coming with me. We're going to visit a lodge that's doing a degree. Because I think it's equally important for that individual to see what I like to say, the other side of the hoodwink. And while we're at it, since we've got him memorizing things, why don't we get him involved in the next degree? There's nothing that says that a newly made entered apprentice can't give the apron lecture to the next guy. And you want to talk about locking things in place? Bill. I freely say that Bill Miller is one of my mentors, and Bill would always tell me that the easiest way to make someone feel like an outsider is to make him feel like an outsider. Don't include him. You don't include him, guess what? He's going to feel like an outsider. So get him involved, get with him, get going with him, because otherwise, again, we're going to spend a whole lot of energy with no payoff at the end, and that's terrible. So I'll go back to my hole.
I've been involved, luckily, to teach proficiency down at King Solomon Lodge. I don't know how many now. There's quite a few, 6, 8, whatever. I do it right at my kitchen table. We talked about getting to know a person and getting the person to know you. And we go through all of the degrees, all the way through. I usually don't force, but I ask my worshipful master, whoever it is at that time, I'd like to confer the 2nd degree, if I may. I like 2nd degrees. But when they get all through, they'll actually say to me, Dan, it's thank you. I say, don't thank me. I get more out of this, more out of seeing you advance than anything else, because I love to do it.
So I was actually one of the guys on the other side of that fence where I don't think I honestly ever met with my mentor one time from the time he was assigned to me. And like Jim said, it's like saying you don't belong. But I was fortunate enough to have about 2/3 of the people that are on this phone call that were part of my group that mentored me to make up for what I lacked from my actual mentor. So I think that Cameron was right on in his talk about really needing to put forth somebody immediately and having that person, engage with them immediately. So, but like I said, I was fortunate enough to have half of the people in this phone call as my mentors. So.
Well, I believe there's more to mentoring than just going through the 3 degrees. After you reach Master Mason, you still need to be mentored in the chairs that you're going through, if you're going to go through the chairs. I mean, I remember coming up and transferred from junior deacon or from junior steward to senior deacon. And I had no clue what I was doing. And when our Grand Master came in at that time, this was just after I was put in the senior deacon's chair, my worshipful master came up to me and says, "Oh, by the way, you have to introduce or you have to present the Grand Master tonight." And I had no clue what I was supposed to say or whatever. Thank God I got through it. And I got to tell you, your mentoring doesn't stop when you become a Master Mason. It continues right on up. As long as you're going to be a Mason, you're always going to be mentoring somebody to some degree.
And if I might add, you're going to be mentoring people even if you don't know that you're doing it, right? Because I've got guys in my lodge and in the Grand Lodge who I look to for direction, but I never have told them that I look to them for direction, right? They're just my image of what an ideal Mason is in any given circumstance, and I try to emulate that. But they don't know that, they're in essence still mentoring me, but certainly they are.
That's a good point, Cameron, because it's true that good or bad, you're always somebody's example.
Yeah.
And you can be the good one or you can be the bad one. The choice is completely yours.
And it's not always somebody that's older than you either. I'm thinking of a fellow that I have that he's in his late 50s now, and I've known him for maybe a dozen years. But he's a very smart guy. He's very knowledgeable in the Masonic fraternity, and I talk to him a lot on the telephone and emails. I consider him a mentor, and he's a few years younger than me, in his late 50s.
So while we're sitting here, I don't mean to change the topics or anything, but what we were talking earlier about staying connected with our brethren. David shared with us about David and Dan actually shared with us about Bud Cook. I just received some news about Don Murray, and I thought I'd share that with everyone. This is from Rob Thompson. Worship Brother Don Murray, as many have heard, he had a recent cancer diagnosis, and unfortunately he's not doing well. Due to COVID, he has not been able to go to the oncologist as much as he should. Sheila is concerned and has been asking him if he is done fighting. So a little outreach on our parts would be good, whether it be a phone call, a card, something. having lived in that world, I know how important it is for people to just say hi. So if you have a chance, I know Don Downing there took Don Murray on his honor flight, and I will all but bet that Don will be the first person that calls Don Murray. But if you would reach out to him, again, that speaks to what we were talking about earlier, and it dovetails, quite frankly, into Cameron's remarks that mentoring doesn't stop, or to quote the Grand Master of New York, Masonry doesn't stop. And so let's all make it a point to reach out to Don.
Along those lines, Mindy, my wife, called Sheila and has made grocery runs for Sheila and Don, and she seems all right. We've been getting a weekly report from Sheila that she's been putting out, but she didn't make it sound that bad. So I'll be in contact with Don probably tomorrow and see what's going on with him. And I'll make him talk and not Sheila, okay? Thanks very much. I appreciate that, Jim.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't want to make this a memorial service, but I'll tell you, talking about mentorship, Don had an immediate impact in my advancement. As much as Dan and Bud put up with me every Monday or every third Monday with proficiency, getting through that, I just could not get the closing charge. I just could not get it. And Tom and Barry and I rode over in Tom's car and Barry's car back and forth to the Lodge Leadership Retreat, and at that time Warden's Conference, and we just did a round robin, but I just could not get that dang closing charge. And it was my first Lodge Leadership Retreat. I was so excited. I said, guys, we got to get the whole district together. Let's, and I'm the FNG. I'm my second year in Masonry or third year in Masonry. And so I said, we got to get together. We got to get together and come. We have to have a meeting, have a regular thing going on. And so we were all kind of chit-chatting in the back of the room, getting ready to leave for the day. And Don approached me and he was chatting with me. Again, I'm the new guy. And I said, he goes, well, how are you doing? What are you doing? I said, I can't get this dang closing charge. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I just, it's not locking in. And he goes, it's only 8 sentences, David. I said, what do you mean? It's way more than 8 sentences. He said, no. It's 8 sentences. He said, look here. And he pointed them out. I said, oh my gosh. And within half an hour, I had it. I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
I had something similar. It didn't come from Don Murray, but one of the other brothers at that time helped me break it down into those sentences. And that was all the difference of the world for my memorization. And I still use that tool today. I'll break something down differently to find the cadence that works for me.
Yeah. Well, on another note too, our right works from Cameron alluded to a program that I'm working on, and if we had our annual communication in normal fashion, you'd would have had an opportunity to vote on a resolution, actually 2, but one more importantly that I was putting forward, one and our lodge is putting forward, one in that we're the slight change in the name of the New Canon Education Program to the Masonic Education Program. It seems like a simple change, a slight change, but that will open up the opportunity for more education to be codified, if you will. The second resolution is in more relation to the New Canon Education Program and its use as a proficiency, alternate proficiency. In the code, the issue, I've been schooled on the implementation of the New Canon Education Program, and I understand its usefulness and the reasoning behind why it was implemented now in the years and years ago. And I understand Bill Miller was his reasoning as well about why it was so important at the time. However, if you look at the code clearly says that the lodge is the sole judge of proficiency. So the lodge can do whatever it wants. There are I think there's 3 main codified requirements for a member to advance in proficiency. But other than that, it's the sole judge of the lodge. The lodge is the sole judge. It doesn't mean the master, doesn't mean the committee, whatever, it's the lodge. So, whatever the lodge decides they want to be, if they say, yes, master, you can decide, or yes, committee, you can decide. But the lodge is the sole judge of proficiency. Whatever that lodge decides is the proficiency. So whether they want to use the New Canaan Education Program or Masonic Education Program or Pilgrim's Progress or whatever, however they want to decide, it's up to the lodge. As long as the 3 things in the code, they have to know the signs and I apologize, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I think there's 3 things the code indicates that they do have to show proficiency in. So
I got a
like-
commercial.
go ahead, Jerry.
I like using that alternate proficiency because occasionally you can run across a man who just cannot memorize, but he can tell you every last thing about what is going on. He'll explain to you what's in that posting lecture quite well, but he just don't remember it.
And per the code, you can use it, even if that wasn't in there. The really heartfelt thing is that it says that every member will receive a copy of that. Could we stand here and say, yes, every single candidate has received a copy of the New Canaan Education Program? They do now because it comes in the back of the book if they get the whole book. But a lot of times the secretary or the lodge will dole out the book to the candidate as they go through. So do they really get the whole NCEP? I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of those. The sad part is, I remember I was Grand Master that said, "Hey guys, we're not doing this. We need to do this." But one of the many things that I learned was that's what's when and Bill can back me up with this. That's what's known as an unenforceable edict. Because how do you, how do you make sure that they're doing it? You have to trust that. The only thing you can trust the only way you can tell is that they're not getting it because they're not learning anything. They're not absorbing anything. So. There's 2 things I'd like to bring up, if you don't mind. Number one, on Wednesday at 5:00, the Grand Lodge of California is hosting Right Worshipful Brother Dr. Oscar Allen. Right Worshipful Brother Oscar is the current Junior Grand Warden for the Grand Lodge of New York. He's also a candidate for the office of Deputy Grand Master. Yeah, they do things a little differently in New York, okay? They do 2-year terms, and the Grand Master and the Deputy Grand Master are the quote-unquote progressive line. In any event, Oscar is a candidate, but in addition for that, Oscar is also the senior health advisor for the public health programs at the National Association of County and City Health Officials. His presentation this Wednesday is going to be entitled Perspectives on the COVID-19 Pandemic, Our Path to Resilience and Recovery, specifically Masonic recovery. If you want to attend this, it's going to be at 5:00. It's being sponsored by the Grand Lodge of California. I just sent everyone the link via chat. You can go to attend this, and I've heard Oscar speak on multiple occasions. People ask me, my opinions on things. Go, let me check what Oscar's saying, because he has his degree in he's an epidemiologist. That's what he does. So the last time I attended a presentation, it was him and the Surgeon General. So we're not talking about low-level speakers here.
Jim, is there a Facebook post from California that we could share on D13?
It's on the D13 site.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So it's on there. So that way I encourage you. It's 5:00. It's open to anyone. Doesn't matter if you're a member of the Grand Lodge of California or not. So if you can attend that would be wonderful, and I hope you do that. There's one of the things.
Before you move on from that, Jimmy, let me comment on Oscar.
Sure.
I'm here to tell you, Oscar Elaine is probably the smartest person you will ever run across in your whole life, and he has a fantastic memory. I ran across a name in one of the bodies that I belong to from way back. I'd never heard of him before. And so I emailed Oscar and asked him by any chance that he ever heard of this guy. It was not 2 minutes. I'm not kidding. I got an answer back, and he gave me a big outline about how this guy was involved in the body that we were talking about, and about a half a dozen references for me to go search for myself. He is an amazing person. And he has this incredible responsibility for the pandemic that we're in right now. That's his area of expertise. So I really he's one of these guys, in spite of how smart he is and how accomplished he is, he talks so that you can understand him. So I really encourage you to log in on this.
Yeah, it's gonna be worth your while. I mean, I've already registered myself. It's fantastic. On a completely tangential note, Cameron, thank you so much for sharing your information with us. It's valuable, and I know that it's one of your talking points as you go as you travel, and I hope it'll continue to be a talking point as you progress up the line. I was wondering if you could share one other thing with us. You kind of have a specialty that you've been able to share with lodges with respect to the area of building improvements.
Yes.
Could you? I mean, if y'all have time, since we have unlimited time, I think y'all would benefit from this.
Yes. So the state has a capital budget. It's divided into a number of sections, and one of those sections directly applies to buildings, such as our buildings. And when I worked for the legislature, it always kind of shocked me because, like, the Freemasons were the only community group ever, as near as I could tell, that never asked for any funding. I couldn't do anything about it when I worked there, so when I left my employment, one of the first things I did was convince Centralia Lodge, hey, we got to ask for some of this money and see if it'll work. And lo and behold, it did. We have received funding at Centralia for improvements to that building. We received funding for our lodge in Asotin for that building. We received money this year, just this year, for our lodge in Skycomish. And we also received money for our lodge in Ilwaco. And we've done that in the brief period of 3 years. And it's not a difficult thing to do. All a lodge really needs to do is invite the legislators to the lodge, to the building, show them around, get to know them a little bit, because they need to be able to explain, if they turn in a request on behalf of the lodge, why it's necessary and what the building's used for, and all these who knows what kind of crazy questions they might get from their colleagues. So the better you know them, the better chance of success that you're going to have. But just invite them into community events or what have you, and then once you get to know them fairly well, hit them up for some cash and ask, is there any way that the capital budget can help us with our windows here or our furnace or whatever it might be. And I think, whatever it is, it has to have some kind of state purpose. So that could be historic preservation for a lot of our buildings. That could be energy efficiency, right? That's a big one now. That could be the community use in our buildings if we happen to have a building that has a lot of community use. So we just it's easy enough to ask for the money. If they agree to help us, it's like a 4-page application anybody can fill out, and there's really nothing to it. The only caveats are the lodge or the temple board has to pay the bills up front, and then the state reimburses them later. And while there's no set time for that reimbursement, in my experience, it's about 90 days out. So the lodge or the temple board actually does have to have the money to cover it for that period of time. And the other thing is, and what kind of scares me a little bit, is oftentimes our temple boards, right, we're kind of by gosh and by golly, and whoever can do the work, and we're not keeping too many records or getting too many permits. We have to remember that if the state pays for this project, technically it's a state project, and it has to meet state requirements. So when we seek our bids, we have to make sure those contractors know that they have to meet all the state construction requirements around permitting, around prevailing wage is a big one that trips you up, and our temple boards especially around record keeping for all this money. Because any state program on a regular basis gets audited by the state auditor. And having watched one organization go through this a few years ago, you don't want to get caught having done it incorrectly, having cut corners, because the state solution is they're going to take their money back, even if you don't have it. So it's a great way to get money. We have to be careful when we do it to do it correctly. But it has been very successful for our lodges. I think the lodges that have sort of followed the program I just outlined, and I'm willing to help any lodge do it, we've had extraordinary success. I think maybe our smallest amount of money we asked for was $20,000 or thereabouts for Skycomish Lodge, and right around $70,000 for our lodge over in Asotin.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sorry, Cameron, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we shouldn't also, if we do this, we shouldn't be afraid to ask big, because didn't Centralia, didn't their legislature come back and say you should have asked for more?
yes. So we asked them for windows. They gave us the window money, and when they were doing it, our senator said to us, "Well, you guys should have asked us for bathrooms because your bathrooms suck." So we could have asked for more, apparently. The caveat to that is that our legislators in Centralia knew our lodge building extremely well, right? Because we've been inviting them in for years for various and sundry community events before we ever asked them for money. So the more of that prep work you do, the better a chance you're going to have, and the more money you can ultimately ask for. And the other thing is, this isn't a one-shot deal, right? They have a new capital budget every single year. Probably not next year, but that's a weird case because of the COVID. But normally every single year, and you can go back and back.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you, sir.
David?
Well, I was going to say it's been an hour, a little over an hour here, and we really appreciate everybody coming on tonight. Wanted to share, if I could, as a little bit of, unless somebody has some closing comments before I kind of share up a wrap up message here. Any last comments?
Brothers, I mean, I see mostly District 13 here. Brothers, be checking on your building a couple times a week. We got real lucky where our the janitor, who's a brother, just goes in and flushes toilets and just does a check of the whole building. And we happen to have a new water main put on outside the building, not us, but the city did, and it created a problem. So had he not been checking on it, we could have had a big water disaster. So yes, the buildings are closed, but still somebody needs to be checking on your buildings, and at least every week is my opinion. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention the 33 Degrees and Beyond, the Freemason documentary, is now on Amazon Prime Video for free.
Really?
Yeah. Also, he did another one after that about the Illuminati. That one's on there as well. And they're both free if you have Amazon Prime. So
awesome.
There you go.
Check it out. Does everybody receive the Grand Lodge Messenger, the monthly email newsletter? Does anybody not receive it? Maybe that's a question. Does anybody not receive it? Go ahead and raise your hand if you don't receive the Grand Lodge email messenger. I only see Dan's hand up. So, and Todd and Nick. Okay.
Nick.
So there's at the Grand Lodge, they send out a monthly email newsletter called the Grand Lodge Messenger, and it has timely information. It's not the full Tribune, but it's just a kind of an update. I will forward. So I see Nick and Todd and Dan don't receive that. So I will forward you a copy. There should be a subscribe link in there, and we'll make sure you receive it. One of the things that I noticed in the March edition, our Grand Master had a note about his visit to Canada. Every year they go up to Victoria 1 for their installation. And of course, it's a big, big event. And the Grand Master of Grand Master of British Columbia and Yukon was there. And just a side note, we just had last night on a recording for our podcast, immediate past Grand Master Barry Birch. He was sad to say that he couldn't attend our Lodge Leadership Retreat this year, but he'll be there in August. Just so those that are going to be attending Lodge Leadership Retreat, he will be there in August when we have that. Anyway, the Grand Master of British Columbia, Most Worshipful Franklin, was doing the closing remarks at that installation, and he had some questions that he posed to the membership. And I'll pose these to you, and I'll paste them into the group chat. But if you can get to the March newsletter, they are in that newsletter. Number one, suppose your lodge was limited to 25 members. Would you be in or out? Number two, suppose you had to run for membership as a candidate runs for office. Would you win or lose? Suppose your membership was for 1 year and that you had to be reelected depending on your service. Would you be reelected? Number four, suppose you were called upon to explain why you should be retained. Do you have a record of service to help you in your defense? Number five, suppose every member did as you were doing. Would your lodge be the most active one around, or would it disappear into obscurity? And this is my favorite. Suppose you were charged with being a member. Would there be enough evidence to convict you? On that note, brethren, thank you so much. This I don't, unless Jim Most Worshipful wants to fly away, we'll be here and you can chat and socialize and do whatever. But if those anybody,
I'm going to keep this open. Y'all talk all you want. I'll keep this open until it looks like people are hanging up. So y'all have a good time.
Thank you. Yeah, so anybody you can head off if you want to, but as a closing part, in honor of the day, may the fourth be with you.
Nice.
Has nothing to do with it, but hey, what the heck?